That's interesting. I almost came to talk to you guys, and then you were banging in a unique way. I was like, oh wow, because it was an we never talked about that. I got a book in the mail, and I thought, oh boy, I don't know I better be careful. Man, I should tell you, like, you seem to know everything, so like, I don't have to tell you guys anything. But you see, then you banged in this interesting way. Um, like you said, there's a certain type of I'm not. I would never assume what people in universities are. I don't want to assume anything, but like this is the kind of book that this is the kind of thing that persons like me find interesting. That whereas other things are like necessary to know or like necessary to do the activity, this is one I got in the mail that like is of interest to. There's something like I'm interested in personally, which is it has to do it has to do with this with the Second Amendment, and it's a book that I had years ago. Not I really it's called "That Every Man Be Armed: The Evolution of a Constitutional Right." And what I was it's a kind of thing like though like an academic. What do we call it? I think you read this in law school, maybe. I mean, it's not like wouldn't be on a shelf like in a Borders books or something. Or you'd read it. No, I guess in law school. Yeah. But the thing is, like, what I was looking for in it, like, actually, when you started knocking like that, I mean, it was the part that where it's where there are a lot of the writings on that Second Amendment thing real interesting to people like me. But it was I didn't know where that phrase came from, like that a man, they say a man's home is his castle. Like when people say that, like it's like an expression that I would use or that meant anything. But it turns out that's actually pulled from this long passage that is from. That's just it. I was looking for one of the Supreme Court justices wrote it. A very long passage that's so moving and so having nothing to do with it, that was like would sum up why I'm like I could when I say I could understand like I don't know anything about the psychology of the population or with regard to these things or with regard to the laws or the gun control versus this or that. I'm not. That's not my. I don't live. I never was part of a. I don't know anything about that kind of thing. I've never I'm a little sort of scared of guns or something. But I mean, so I don't know anything about it. But some of this stuff is a very incredibly moving ways of describing why in that particular passage which said that. But I'm saying as someone who's had a lot of things happen to me where a lot of harm came down on me started in 2009, and it was all situations where or in starting in 2008, maybe even things happening to a person of that had the person been armed, they could have stopped it. Right there. Things happening where it wouldn't have happened if I started to realize. I never understood why do some people want to really. I understand there's hunters and all that, and I don't know what that's about. But or the people are in. I don't know. Why would someone want to be armed, or why was there a time in our history when everyone was sort of armed? I mean, the time you read about Dickens' experience in America and American Notes, it's so interesting. Like he part of his understanding of the colonies, or like, oh no, he went over to visit right after the Revolution. I mean, no one reads American Notes. It's like not known. It's not a Dickens work that's known because it's not a novel. But he did something that you had to be very wealthy to do, which is to pay to go on a ship to check out what happened after the revolution in America. Like the colonies had their revolution, and it was such and such time after. People in Britain were really, what's going on now that they've had a revolution, have their own government, they're separate from us. And if you were wealthy and like famous, you could get on a boat and go see it. And you had to write about like what happened after the American Revolution. And he notices all kinds of things, and basically the story goes that by the end of that trip that he wrote that on, he was essentially having a nervous breakdown because there were so many things that were taking place in this new country that had been founded that based after the revolution. But one of them was, it was just all so unfamiliar, but one of them was, his line is, that these people, like, they all show each other, like, sort of respect, and everyone's very respectful towards one another, but you sense like it's because people seem to have a sort of distrust of other people generally and are all armed. So as a result, there's this kind of like, well, good day, sir, like, good day to you. People are like sort of very respectful, but they're all armed. And that he writes about it in a way. And it is true. There's a level of disrespect and abuse that like has come down on me starting in, let's say, 2008 by different kinds of people that I hadn't sort of encountered before, and different kinds of messed up things that can happen where like you realize that they have no boundaries, they have no respect, they seem to have no conscience, they have no understanding of like what's right and wrong in an interpersonal situation. But you realize immediately why some people feel like they want to be armed, because there are people that are dangerous and abusive, but in ways that are impossible to stop, except such a person would be the only way. You realize there's a type of abuse that comes down on people, a type of maltreatment that comes down on people, where it would there seems no way to stop it. But then again, were the person to say stop and had a weapon, they'd stop. And I finally started to understand that must be why some people, like, I hadn't met a lot of types of people before. A lot of types of abuse hadn't come down on me. I hadn't met different kinds of abusive people in my life that are abusive in ways that were unfamiliar. I had only understood a tiny bit about what abusiveness towards others means. And I didn't know that there were people who didn't understand boundaries between other people, or didn't understand you can't just do what you want, or talk to people the way you want, or stalk someone, for example, or not leave someone alone, or play a game on someone that's based on like sort of psychological stunts. And I realized why. And like I was reading this when I was in that place I'm always talking about, and I think that it's fascinating to read the history of the Second Amendment, but then again, this is one of these books that you're like, if it's on your shelf and no one knows it's in it, like, are they gonna, you think you're dangerous. You have to be like in law school to read this, but it's not like something that like a person who's deranged would read. But it's such a fascinating part of our like history and law to read about these things, but like I still don't know much about what's going on with all that type of thing, like the NRA and those politics. Mystery to me, because I'm from cities, like a big city like New York. We're not all hunting or something, so I don't know much about it. But it's interesting that you knocked.